So this is the Aillio Bullet Roaster, and I've been using it for a few weeks, just using the instrument panel here to roast. Been having really good results, and it's taken me a long time to hook it up to a PC. I mean, the first problem is I'm kind of a Mac person, so I had to acquire this PC from something else we use it for a printer. And then I had a really silly problem. This is so embarrassing, but obviously this is like old USB, whatever, 2.0 or USB-A. I had believed that the light here, this was the data port as well, even though in the on the info sheet it tells you US LED port is for light only, but what it doesn't do is tell you the location of the actual data port, which I finally found. There. I just couldn't find it. I looked around, so I advised them to make it more idiot-proof for people like me. Anyway, what I'd done is I'd gone online and ordered a bunch of USB, A to USB-A cables, because this isn't, which is not a normal thing that you do. I figured I'd get quite a few of them because that's not something commonly found. And now I've got a whole stack of them I have to return because it's a micro USB, very standard cable to a USB 3.0 or 2.0 or USB-A. Anyway, I am ready now, finally, to roast using the control panel. So I'm just going to start this out by going into preheating mode. Okay, so it's now been 6 minutes, almost 7 minutes. My roaster is warm. It'll just sit there and hold the temperature for you until you're ready for it. And so I'm going to load a 500 gram batch and see how it goes. I never know whether I should indicate roasting first or after. Let me struggled a little with getting this in the right position. Anyway, I'm going to use the controls here. So it tells me I'm charging. And I think it automatically senses the temperature drop of the coffee going in. You take off the top, you replace the plug, and we're starting to chart our roast here now. So it reset the time. This is the roast software that comes with it. Comes with the Bullet roast time, and it's automatically started my timer. I don't have to do that. It's got my drum temperature, my bean temperature, and my bean ROR, which means rate of rise. I have my drum power at P6, which for 500 grams is a little low. It's okay. My fan speed's at 2, my drum speed's at 8, so I have control over all of those. And this is nice because I can start to mark on here automatically when I see yellowing, when I hear first crack starting, and if and when I hear second crack starting. As you can see, it's graphing my values there and condensing the scale as I go along. And also I can load roast profiles that I've used. I haven't gotten to that yet. This is literally my first roast using the PC. And I do notice that these values are different. You can you can view this in Celsius, but you can actually change the scale here to Fahrenheit if you want, or you could use pounds and grams, but only here I believe you cannot change it to Fahrenheit here. Anyway, I'm going to let this run for a while. I think what's really cool about and also maybe kind of dangerous about roasting with a computer and graphing things. And many people would argue this. There's some roasters that, use this as data input. Ultimately, the thing is that you're trying to recognize the changes that you make in roasting in the result, the quality of the coffee that you taste. So you don't want to get lost in numbers and roast curves and what this should be doing or that should be doing, unless it relates to the quality and taste of the roast. If it doesn't, then it goes off into being something for its own sort of sake. The neat thing about logging roast like this is that, especially as you make changes, and you're given change of both drum speed, fan speed, and your heating element, that as you change those in different ways, you're able to see the effect on the both the drum temperature and the bean temperature, which are measured separately. So it gives you this extra ability to not just have to wait. It's like film photography versus digital in a way. Like film, you'd have to wait. You send your film for processing, then you see what you got, and then you go, oh, I did this big mistake. Well, maybe this extra tool that allows you to see things quicker in terms of results will allow you to make decisions differently. So that's what I look at data logging and these things to be, is because maybe I can learn to recognize something in here that I already know isn't going to work out in the cup, and make a change and get a better roast result. But as I said, it has to be pinned to this final thing, which is you can't drink a data profile. You can't drink a beautiful roast curve or the knowledge, that's only good to make yourself unwelcome at parties. To sit there and blah, 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 blah about my roast curve, my rate of rise, this sort of data. But if it relates to the coffee, then, well, you still might get kicked out of the party, but. So this is roast number 2, actually, underway. I've already marked the yellowing. You basically have this little yellow dot where you mark here to signify that yellowing started, and then you can mark the start and end of first crack, and if you had any, the start and end of the second crack. I'm being more aggressive here with this roast. My first roast, I wasn't really sure whether my preheating was done, whether I charged it accurately. So I actually waited. This time I set the preheating to 170 Celsius and waited until the machine told me to charge the roast, which it will do, which is cool. And once you charge it with the coffee, it will switch automatically to roasting. I already see this temptation, though, as you sit over here. Sorry about the reflections, and you just look at the numbers a lot. And instead of being over here at the machine, you're looking at the coffee. So I would definitely set up the computer so that you're right at the machine and can really be there. I see some, it's hard to see. We're getting a lot of steam coming off of it, and I expect to hear first crack here very soon. Let's check it out in the trier. Trier is very small, and one issue you'll have if you try to do extremely small roasts. I mean, this is the size of a trier on quite a lot of small machines. It's like a 10 bean trier. But if you do small roasts, you're going to have trouble actually getting coffee into the trier. And the other, small meaning under 500 grams. And the other issue is that it may not be hitting the bean sensor. Okay, there we've got first crack. So hit it there. That starts a timer, and this switches to finish, so and marks the event here. Quite an aggressive crack. I'm going to back off my heat. It's one of the more louder cracks I have. In fact, I got to put this down because I have to evacuate this roast that I left in here. So, got to go. Okay, so I'm back and I wanted to document the end of this roast. It's a little darker than I wanted. But we hit the... You could do that from here, but I prefer to do it here. And the cooling fan kicks into high. The coffee takes a little while to come out of the drum here. I don't think it's a big issue. A couple of the beans sometimes miss the cooling drum. I think this whole design is really amazing. You know, you have this sort of power port here, separated with a high-speed fan back in here. And what you really want to do with this is to shake it out and get it really even. Because if it's even, then the air is pulling evenly through all the coffee. And what I like to do is after a minute and a half, I'll stir it and then even it out again, just to make sure there's no like hot spots. But I'm finding it cools really effectively. I also do this here, which is to kind of lock. I don't know if that's intended to lock the door open, since you have to. It takes a while for the coffee to come out. The other thing I want to show you here is that, let's say I want to start another roast right away while this cools. So they've provided for that by F1 goes to back, you adjust your temperature, goes right into preheating. So you can start your next batch and you're pretty much at temperature there. So heating and cooling and roasting at the same time is easy. The thing I didn't finish saying before I had to get that coffee out of there is just that the really small batches, maybe 200 grams, 100 gram sample batches, the sensors aren't going to be hitting the drum the right way, so I'm not really sure how to handle that yet. I've done 300 grams and it seemed to work pretty good. But like I said, the trier, you couldn't really get coffee in the trier very easily. It's a pretty minor quibble. Cool. And when I hit the end of the roast, it opened up another screen where I saved this. It has my coffee here that I'd already entered in. A roast name, data about the roast, the size of the roast, the weight of the coffee before and after. You could be recording all these things. I'm probably not going to do most of those, but it did sort of auto-enter my first crack time. I could go back to this screen. I didn't, it was still in first crack basically, so I can finish it, which is sort of weird. And that's my cooling time. Let's see how it's cooling right now. Oh wow, that's great. That was really cool. At only 1:30. Fantastic. I did find that with the 800 gram or 1 kilo batches, that cooling's definitely slower, as you'd expect. But super efficient, especially at these 500 gram batches. So, this is a kind of a, you know, these are literally my first and second roasts with the PC. So it's not like I'm know much here. I kind of enjoy throwing myself into this and just see how it works, because sometimes in your first runs through something you notice things that are maybe obvious, but then you can go back to the literature, or you can go back online and teach yourself more about it or what people are saying. But until you know what the problems are, you don't really even know what questions to ask. So sometimes I think it's great to just kind of jump in and try it out, and that's what I'm doing. All right, bye. So I am trying to explore the parameters of the Aillio Bullet Roaster by roasting as slow as I can and as fast as I can. This is a slow roast I just completed, and I have my other roast going right now. So this is the inner part of the cooling dog bowl dish apparatus. And I really do like this design. You don't need a rotating arm and a cooling vent. What you need is to level the coffee out over something that's sucking the air down, which the fan is back here, pulling it out. And this is great because you can just take it out. And here you see the kind of filter and some of the chaff that's pulled out. The one thing I'd say is that Bullet doesn't do a fantastic job sucking chaff out of the coffee during the roast process. There's some things you could do with a shop vac that could assist that, but at this point I don't want to do that. I've done it with other roasters. But one thing is you'll see some chaff in here, and luckily this actually already did it. This makes a pretty good winnowing basket where you can basically shake and toss and at the same time blow and just go and get quite a lot the remaining chaff out. I guess the one thing is that chaff in your roasting, you can't see it yet because pre-first crack it hasn't separated here. It kind of makes your viewing a little bit more difficult in terms of what your degree of roast is, but very minor point and just a part and parcel of this machine. On this roast I'm using P8 with a moderate fan speed, so I'm throwing more heat at it. The same 500 gram roast of the same coffee, which we're picking a kind of nice, good, neutral coffee. And this is my rate of rise, which has gone up here and is still quite high. My last roast was about 8. It averaged out to about 8 and then dropped from there. We're seeing a higher rate of rise, throwing more heat at it, just sort of exploring some of the parameters of the roaster. And I see some pretty early yellowing here, which I'll go down here and you hit mark and it puts a little yellow dot there. That's highly subjective, but it's much more useful that you record the start and end of first crack. And if you get to it, the start and end of second crack. That's really neat. It gets logged in the profile. You can see that a reported yellowing here. Anyway, this is still just me figuring out the machine and the computer control. I did find yesterday I did about 4 roasts, and exactly what I predicted and what I think is a problem with using a computer in some ways is it distracts you and you start looking at numbers instead of looking at your machine and looking at your roast and sensing and getting all that visual input and smell and everything else for what's going on with your coffee, which hopefully this is a good tool. The laptop's a great tool that furthers that understanding and doesn't sort of distract you from it. This is developing really fast, which is what I intended for this roast. I'm sort of looking at flavors I get from throwing a bunch of heat at it, and I better get this ready, so bye. So this is the Bullet. This is where you're loading the coffee. And this is, you have the transfer tube here that comes from the front to the back here for airflow, and your fan. And what I've done here is removed the back cover where you have your chaff unit. I'll put this back together. This is a sort of a filter that goes in here, like a tea basket. One thing I noticed about this, it's very fine, and I think over time, even while it looks like you can see through it, your little pinholes will basically close down. So yeah, over time I think this will have some issues, and I think one thing you can do is use a kind of Cafezza type, Ernex Cafezza, or another sort of stronger solvent. Another thing that might work is like I think you call it sodium percarbonate that they use in beer brewing cleaning. Anyway, I just took this off, vacuumed it out. I'll put it back in. The first time I took this out, I took this whole rubber gasket out, which is kind of a little bit hard to get back in, not impossible. So what I do now is I hold the rubber gasket and just work this out. You can clean it from this side. Also, between roasts, without removing the chaff container, there's a access door here. And you can vacuum that out with like a shop vac. I even think that in a way, if I really set this up, I might either use this or penetrate it with a shop vac kind of orifice that fits right on there. Anyway, the way this works is pretty neat. It just goes into place, and there's a little pin here, little locking mechanism. You can pull it out and feel it go in. Yep. And to remove it, you just, this light is weird. You just pull this, and there it is. Again, really well made. I mean, here commercial components, this sort of squirrel cage fan. This is your belt here that you might have to change. I think over time you're going to want to clean this. I can see the lock nut there. You would access it here very easily. This is your sort of exhaust there. I'll show that to you in a second. One thing is the transfer tube here, which is just like a kind of Probat roaster with the airflow. If you look carefully way in there, we can see the front. There's my finger. There's a few coffee beans in there. This is a typical problem when loading a commercial roaster, is that a little bit of coffee goes into the transfer tube. I figured out that it seemed to me like something with technique that I'd have to be more careful about. I actually figured out I was just putting in the funnel wrong. They actually designed it to block that transfer tube. So if you get this just right, that will go in. See how it's longer on that side, and it will block it, so you can't get any coffee in there. So they have anticipated a lot with this, and I think because they took a fairly long time developing it, and do some cleaning there eventually, not a big deal. Because they took a long time developing it, I think they had a lot of feedback, got a lot of uses in, and were able to make some changes. Well, that's not going to go, is it? Okay, let's make sure this is shut. And this is your exhaust here. So if you wanted to really sort of contain the exhaust smoke, you can put this right under a vent of some kind. This exciting screen capture is roasting, my first sort of roast test of the Aillio Bullet with a range from 84 points to 86 points, which is pretty moderate scoring. I'm sort of not too pressed today, I guess, but it's actually a really nice coffee. So what I did is I roasted San Diego Buena Vista Bourbon from Guatemala 5 different ways, trying to just sort of test the outer ranges of the bullet. These are 500 gram roasts, which I thought was a good middle ground. It's actually kind of on the small side for the bullet. To just sum it up, what I would say was the range of what I did was a very fast roast, which was only a total of 7 minutes, 41 second roast time, with the 6 minute, 11 second first crack, and extremely baked roast that was 20 minutes long with like a 15-minute first crack. That one did not score well. The second sort of baked roast, which was not that long, was what I called a Probat-like roast times, like what we get on our 12 kilo Probat, which was like a 12-minute first crack, finishing up, I think about 14 minutes, 15 minutes. So interesting to note that, like, just because something roasts more like a commercial roaster doesn't mean that's the good roast for that machine. When you scale down a machine, when you're using different sort of, your batch sizes, your heat transfer, you don't just want to replicate what you do in a larger roaster and somehow that's just going to be good. So what I did find is that one of the profiled roasts that I did that was first crack. Oh, I made an adjustment at 8:30, between 8:30 and 8:50 first crack minutes was really quite good. It was a lighter roast, and actually a roast I didn't intend to be good, which was one where I threw a lot of heat at it. Was the second best, which was only 7 minutes 41 seconds total. So what I think I'm gravitating towards here is that drawing out roast in the Bullet, trying to do things that they do in a commercial roaster, like 10, 12 minute first cracks, finishing up 15 minutes, is not really where you're going to get the best cup for lighter brewed coffee. Could be better for espresso. What it looks like is you actually kind of want to throw the heat at it and get things done a little quicker. So on the profiled roast, I basically ramped up heat and then dropped it, like by going on this one from P6 heat with F3 fan. I have using a little more fan to moderate the heat, and then dropped it down to P5, which is a lower burner setting. But that's like the lower end of the burner settings. Usually you start as a default at P6. And the other one, I started at P7 with F3 fan, a little higher fan, a little higher heat, and then dropped it down all the way to F4. I'm sorry, fan up, heat down at the end to tail out the roast more gently. That actually wasn't my favorite. So just sort of getting a grip on what kind of roast profiles work the best. And the coolest thing is all of these on the Bullet are recorded. Your adjustments to fan and roast, other settings, drum speed is recorded in the roaster. You have a curve, and you can even replay the curve again. So this is what you end up with at the end. It's still just logging because it's on, but it's not really. And you end up with a rate of rise. You can see here your bean development. This is the first crack times I recorded, and this was the power setting. I'm sorry, that's the drum temperature. And down here are the settings, and when I change them, you can see they change a little. Like here, I changed the fan speed here, here, and here. Well, this was cooling, so you can see that, and everything's recorded, including like your roast time. You don't need a timer or anything, which is nice. One less thing. Okay.